You have probably heard this saying. In the past, people only lived to be about 30 years old. Hearing that, it is easy to imagine a 30-year-old ancient person, gray-haired, hunched over, toothless, walking out of a cave with a cane, and then lying down to die of old age. But that image is almost completely wrong. Ancient people didn't just hit an expiration date at 30. The problem lies in a massive misunderstanding of the term average lifespan. When people say the average lifespan in ancient times was only about 30 years, it doesn't mean most adults died at 30. It usually means that a huge number of children died very early, which dragged the average number way down. Imagine a group of 10 people. 5 die in childhood, maybe before the age of 5. The other 5 live to be 60 or 70. If you add up the ages they died and divide to find the average, you get a number around 30 or 35. But in that group, no one actually died of old age at 35. Half died before they could grow up. Half lived a very long time. That is the trap of statistics. And that is why the question, why did ancient people die young, needs to be understood correctly. The real question is not, why did they age so fast? But rather, why did so many people fail to survive their early years? The most fragile years, childhood. If you were a baby born in the ancient world, life was fragile from the very first second. No hospitals, no obstetricians, no sterile delivery rooms, no antibiotics, no ventilators, no vaccines. No clean water by modern standards. A difficult birth could turn into a disaster. A premature baby had very little chance of survival. A postpartum fever could take the lives of both mother and child. A minor infection could spread rapidly. A season of famine could mean children were the first to fall. For modern humans, a newborn is surrounded by clean towels, warm water, medicine, medical staff, milk, machines, and vast accumulated knowledge. For ancient humans, a newborn entered a world that was cold, dirty, dangerous, and unforgiving. Therefore, infant mortality is the biggest factor that pulled the average lifespan down. This is the most heartbreaking part of the story. Not because ancient people couldn't live a long time, but because so many never got the chance to grow up. If a child survived their first few years, their chances of living much longer went up significantly. And if a person made it through their teenage years, they could absolutely live to be 50, 60, or even 70. But to get there, they had to pass through an incredibly brutal checkpoint: childhood. The invisible killer: infection. The biggest enemy of ancient humans wasn't always wild beasts. It was usually much smaller. It was invisible. It was infection. A small cut today could become death a few days later. A thorn in the foot, an animal bite, a hunting wound, a burn, a tear from childbirth, an infected tooth. All of these could become a gateway for death. Today, if you get a mild infection, you go to the doctor, take medicine, apply antiseptic, and rest for a few days. But for most of human history, there were no antibiotics. There was no simple way to stop bacteria once it had spread deep into the body. A wound that was red, hot, painful, and leaking pus could progress to a high fever, then delirium, then exhaustion, then death. And the terrifying thing is, you didn't need a major accident for this to happen. You didn't need to be mauled by a tiger. You didn't need to fall off a cliff. You didn't need to be pierced by a spear. Sometimes, just a dirty scratch was enough. This is why, when looking back at the past, we often underestimate the value of modern medicine. The most important thing isn't just that we can cure major diseases. It's that we have turned countless deadly risks into minor inconveniences. A toothache, a small wound, a difficult birth, a bout of pneumonia. Today, many of those can be cured. In the past, They were a roll of the dice with death. The paradox of civilization. Disease in ancient times wasn't the same in every era. This is a bit contrary to popular belief. Many people think the further back in time you go, the more terrible the diseases were, and that moving toward civilization meant better health. But history isn't that simple. Hunter-gatherers lived in small, mobile groups with low population density. This made it hard for major epidemics to spread and survive. Diseases that require a lot of people living close together, like later pandemics, usually needed villages, cities, livestock, trash, and contaminated water. When humans began to farm and settle down, they solved some food problems, but they opened the door to new ones. They lived closer together. They stayed in one place longer. They piled up more trash. They lived closer to livestock. They easily contaminated their water sources. A crowded village might have been a sign of progress, but it was also a paradise for infectious diseases. In other words, civilization didn't just bring houses and crops. It also brought rats, flies, feces, dirty water, animal-borne illnesses, and faster-spreading plagues. The dangers of childbirth and starvation childbirth. Another major reason ancient people died young was childbirth. Today, giving birth still carries risks, but with modern medicine, those risks have been drastically reduced in places with good healthcare. In the ancient world, childbirth was one of the most dangerous moments in a woman's life. A mother could lose too much blood. She could get a postpartum infection. The baby could get stuck. She could suffer from seizures, high fevers, or exhaustion. There was no safe surgery, no blood transfusions, no emergency rooms. And because women in the past often gave birth many times, this risk wasn't just a one-time event. Every birth was a step into the danger zone. This severely threatened women's lifespans, not because they were weaker, but because they faced a repeated biological risk in a world with almost no way to save them if things went wrong. Starvation. Then comes food. Ancient people weren't always starving. Many hunter-gatherer groups had more diverse diets than we think, but the problem was stability. A migrating herd going the wrong way, a long winter, a drought, a flood, a failed hunt. Any of these could push the whole group into starvation. Healthy adults can endure hunger better. Children cannot. The elderly cannot. The sick cannot. Pregnant women especially cannot. Lack of food doesn't just make you thin, it weakens the immune system. A minor illness becomes deadly. A wound heals slower. A malnourished child is much more likely to die from disease. Hunger and disease usually walk hand in hand. A season of scarcity might not kill everyone, but it killed the most vulnerable. Accidents and violence. Imagine the ancient world as a place with no guardrails, no safety boots, no ambulances, no safety goggles, and no warning signs. A hunter could be gored by a beast. A tree climber could fall. Someone crossing a river could be swept away. A broken bone could mean you couldn't hunt, couldn't run, and couldn't keep up with the group. Today, a broken bone means a trip to the hospital. In the past, it was a survival disaster. Violence also contributed to early deaths. Humans are great at cooperating, but we are also highly capable of conflict. Territorial disputes, revenge, raids, and clashes between groups happened. A wound from a rock, spear, club, or arrow wasn't just dangerous because of the initial impact. It was dangerous because of the infection that followed. Did ancient people ever get old? So, if they survived childhood, avoided severe disease, didn't die in childbirth, didn't starve, and avoided fatal accidents, could ancient people grow old like us? The answer is yes, to a surprising degree. Those who made it past the most dangerous stages could absolutely become truly old. They got arthritis, worn-down teeth, bad backs, weak bones, failing eyesight, old wounds that ached when the weather turned cold. In other words, they aged just like we do. They did not die of old age at 30. A 30-year-old in a hunter-gatherer group was likely in their prime, and 50, 60, or 70-year-olds, if they were still alive, were a treasure trove of knowledge. They knew which season plants bore fruit. They knew which paths the animals took. They knew where to find water during a drought. They knew the stories of their ancestors. In a world without books, the elderly were the library. Old age wasn't just a burden, it was a community asset. What did modern medicine actually do? We didn't simply turn humans from a species that only lives 30 years into a species that lives 80 years. The human body has long had the capacity to live to old age. What the modern world did was help more people reach that age. We save infants, we reduce maternal mortality, we vaccinate, we use antibiotics, we filter water, we treat pneumonia, infections, and fevers. In other words, modern medicine didn't just raise the ceiling of our lifespan, it raised the floor of our survival. In the past, too many people fell off the cliff before they could grow up. Today, we have built guardrails along the edge. Conclusion. So, when you hear the phrase, ancient people only lived to be 30, be careful. It might be true in a very narrow statistical sense, but the image it creates in our minds is wrong. Ancient people didn't all age rapidly and drop dead at 30. The average was dragged down by countless lives that ended far too soon. Children who didn't survive their first winter, mothers lost in childbirth, and hunters killed by simple infections. But those who survived those hurdles grew to be truly old. They sat by the fire, watched their grandchildren grow, and kept the memories of the tribe alive. When you understand this, you don't just understand the past better, you understand the present better too. Every time a child is vaccinated, every time a birth is saved, every time an infection is treated with antibiotics, it is a victory over the deaths that used to be considered normal. We live longer today not because our ancestors were weak bodies designed to die young. We live longer because we inherited thousands of years of experience, loss, and mutual care. And perhaps, in the fading light of a prehistoric campfire, an ancient elder looked at the children playing outside the cave and understood something we sometimes forget. Living a long life has never been a given. It has always been a victory.